Welcome, everyone. I'm Sam Sebastian, and you're listening to How Are You Doing Really? In today's episode, I'm joined by my friend David Robinson. David is an educator, an activist, and a bird lover. He shares about his experience of the current world pandemic and also what he's been up to with getting involved with various organizations around the upcoming election. He has a wealth of knowledge in activism and actually started out in the 1980s with an organization called ACT UP, which he references as the gay liberation movement. And he just has a lot of wisdom and experience in the field of activism, and I'm really just grateful for the knowledge that he shares with all of us in this episode, in addition to just his experience along the way and how keeping it in balance is really important. Keeping your life in balance, not just putting all of your time and energy into one thing and not taking care of the other parts of yourselves. So I'm just really honored and grateful to have had him on today, and I hope that you all enjoy. Welcome, everyone. I'm Sam Sebastian, and today I'm joined by my friend David Robinson. And David and we met, I think, about a year ago, potentially a little bit longer, but I know that we were at Easton Mountain for a week-long Tantra retreat that I was facilitating at. So was my partner, Finn. And yeah, I just really enjoyed getting to know you a bit more in that setting. And yeah, just a really special being that I've come into contact with, that's for sure. I know that you've lived quite the life and have just been a very, I think my perception of you has just been a really inspiring person in all the communities that you kind of fly in and out of. You're a teacher, correct?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, amongst other things.
Yeah. Right now, in terms of earning a living, I'm an English teacher at a nerdy little private school in Oakland. But I was a college professor, English lit and LGBT studies. And there's usually teaching involved in, I'd say, most things I've done, except dance and probably, there was one other, but I was going to say activism, but that's not true. There's often teaching involved in that too. So yeah, maybe modern dance is about the only thing that I didn't do any kind of teaching in.
How did you get into modern dance, if you don't mind me asking?
It was both something that was maybe preordained, because when I was a little kid, apparently, I mean, like really little, I used to, as my grandmother and mother would say, David was forever springing. I was always jumping and leaping, and I would dance upstairs to Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, to that. We would make little dances upstairs to that. And before college, I started, I did a year of tap dance when I was in 7th grade. I had fallen in love with Hollywood musicals, especially Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers musicals, and Gene Kelly. And so I took a year of tap, and I was in an adult beginner class, and I was the only non-adult. I was a 7th grader. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But, by the end of that year, say going into the next year is when I started getting bullied for being gay or being a sissy. I didn't even know gay yet, But I did know there was a kid in town who had gone to my elementary school who had done ballet. Like he used to be in the Nutcracker every year in town. And in response to being, made fun of and bullied, he turned into a tough kid, a bad kid. Like he started smoking, probably before middle school and stuff. So I stopped. I just did that 1 year and I didn't do any more. But then after the summer after high school, I took a ballet class at New Jersey Ballet. And then when I got into college, you had to have a PE, fulfill a PE requirement. And so I took ballet. And I actually did it with my roommate. My roommate, Jim, was like, hey, let's do this. And so he was game for it. But he was short and wide and like moved like a guy. So he stopped after a semester and I kept taking it. And I went to Princeton and they had, it's a very academic school, but they had a very good theater and dance program. And their modern dance teacher was this Israeli woman, Ze'eva Cohen, who had been a soloist for a long time. And even though she didn't have the most perfect technique, as we would say in dance, she didn't do all the moves with what you look for when you're like judging a ballet dancer or, things. She was a really powerful artist and she conveyed, particularly to the students, the joy of dance so well that I fell in love with it. And, so I kept taking modern dance classes, and then I tried out for one of the a cappella singing groups on campus, and I got a call back, but I didn't get accepted. So then I auditioned for the modern dance group on campus, and I got in. And after I was with them for the first semester of my sophomore year, and then I had done a lot of AP classes in high school, so I accumulated enough credits that I was actually able to take a semester off. And what I did with that semester was I took dance classes in New York. So I took modern dance and ballet, but the modern dance company troupe at Princeton had this rule that you had to dance for them 2 semesters in a row before you could take a semester off without having to re-audition. So I was really nervous. So I came down every weekend because I moved back with my parents close to New York, but I came down every weekend to rehearse with Expressions, our dance group. Little did I know that like if you were a man and could walk across the stage and not fall down, you were in because it was so hard to get any man. Really. So I really fell in love with it in college. And I even got to combine it with some of my academic work. I had to do a junior paper. We all had to do like a research paper junior year. And I did one on, at my advisor's suggestion. She pointed out that Jane Austen novels had a lot of balls and a lot of dances. She said, why don't you do that? Write on dance in Jane Austen's novels. And so I did, and put together a performance with people, other students that I taught, like dances of the Jane Austen period. So I would like go and learn these historical reconstruction. I'd go to these classes. I remember there was one in Prospect Park in Brooklyn where it was like a 18th century ball. And, I learned the minuet. I learned an early waltz. And so anyway, I got to do this performance. Unfortunately, it was before the days when you videotaped everything and cell phones didn't exist. This is in the 1980s. But we did the performance, I wrote the paper, and I ended up deciding that, when I got out of college, I was going to try to be a dancer. So I ended up, I moved to New York and took modern dance classes and ballet for modern dancers, and eventually started auditioning just for the fun of it. Like my teacher, Eva, had advised me that she said, you should start auditioning before you even want to get anything, because it's a great way to like learn a choreographer, some of their moves, and to learn to be less nervous when you audition. So I auditioned for 2 or 3 things. And I don't know, it was like the second or third audition I went to that I got into that company. I actually fell down during when we learned what they call a combination, a combination of steps, to like, it's sort of like a section of a dance. And so at one point I fell down and I just got up and kept dancing. And flash forward a few months when I was with the company, dancing with the company, the choreographer got really frustrated with me one day. And she said, "You're not dancing like you did when you auditioned. When you auditioned, you were like free and open. And now you're like, nervous." And I was like, yeah, because I didn't care then. It was a good lesson though. But yeah, I ended up actually only doing one season with the company, and they offered me a position with the company, but I felt I needed more technique. So I went into a master's program, an MFA program in dance. But that's also, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but that's also when I got very involved in AIDS activism. So the two ended up really being kind of in conflict. But you were going to say about the being free.
Well, I think it's really just by asking how you got involved in dance just led to so much like history of your life. And I love that. I'm really a fan of supporting what excites people. And I hear the excitement as you talk about these experiences and how it just led you to one thing after the other. And I think what I also hear is just this part of you that really is up for stepping into the unknown and putting your best foot forward and following that and really listening to your heart, because it turned into something that you pursued. And I think one thing about being a gay man and movement, and also just especially as a younger man, there is a lot of judgment that can kind of come from our peers and our friends, and there's also this like cultural like expectation of what a man is supposed to be or a boy is supposed to do. And I think about when I was younger, like around 11, I loved doing gymnastics, and my parents put me into it and did it for about a year. And then my dad just all of a sudden one day was like, "No, you can't do that anymore. That's for girls, not for boys." And I was just so heartbroken, like I loved it. It was, it really, I felt alive. I felt excited. It was something I looked forward to. I was learning how to use my body in a way that I hadn't necessarily done before or practiced, I guess. And I'm sure with dance, there's probably a similar aspect, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think I really want to kind of come back to the question that I typically ask people at the beginning of the podcast, which is, how are you doing really? And yeah, just what's been up for you emotionally during this tumultuous time that we're living in.
Well, how I'm doing really at this moment is, I'd say, different from how I was before talking with you already. I'm more open-hearted and on the verge of tears, and also, feeling joy and sadness at once. So, which is a good thing. I find this the hardest question to answer these days, probably because I have felt so up and down, really big mood swings. We've talked some just, offline about the politics that's happening now. Terrifies me, the fact that we are so close to an election that's the most important one I've ever seen, and that anyone I know, no matter how old, has ever seen. And yet there are very few people, and I am not one of them, who have devoted, like I was just on a webinar that was by a small group of people who have been researching where donations can do the most good, be the most effective. I'll throw in a sports reference, even though I told you that's the one thing I don't want to talk about. But apparently some people call them the money ball of politics, like figuring out the system for using data for, in this case, where to direct money for the biggest effect. And one of the two people who was hosting it at the end said, she has been basically devoting her life since the day after Trump was elected. And maybe that was a slight maybe it was a week after, who knows. But since right after he was elected, to trying to make sure that he was not reelected. And what has kept her going, she said, was she does not want to wake up again and feel like, oh, if only I had done all that I could. And, I'm very aware of not doing all I can, not by a long stretch. And yet I'm doing more than a lot of people I know. And, my school year is about to start. We're going to be virtual for the beginning, at least a month. The first day of classes is, a week from today. Mm-hmm. And the school it's as if COVID is the only thing that's weird right now. Mm-hmm. That's difficult and challenging. There is no attention to the fact that we're in this extremely perilous moment. I'm a Jew, and I know lots of Jewish history. I studied a lot of it, part of sometimes in Hebrew school growing up, but then for myself, wanting to actually try to understand a lot more. And one of the things anyone learns, like if they study certainly the Holocaust, but also other periods, is that things can get much worse as well as much better. And if you're not working to fight the forces that are trying to make them worse, they will get worse. The inertia doesn't carry you forward. The forces of greed, of hatred, of selfishness, if not opposed, then they are the ones that win. And, I won't go on because we know, I'm sure your listeners know, you look at what's been happening these past 4 years, and we have a real subversion of our basic democratic institutions. We have someone who's a demagogue stirring up hatred and using the playbook that has been used by other demagogues who sometimes have become dictators. And, I'm not saying, Trump is going to become a dictator, but I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have violence if he gets defeated. Mm-hmm. Like this is the state of things, that it's not ridiculous. In fact, it's quite rational to be thinking about how dangerous things are and to try to prepare for them, and also then to try to prevent this. So this has been the background to months for me of, it's very hard for me to feel okay. Instead, I keep trying to remind myself to be okay. Try to be okay with not feeling okay. Try to feel okay about being depressed a lot. All those things, being anxious, being semi-crazed. But that's rational. That's normal. That's a response that makes sense.
And I think something that's coming to mind as you share this is just remembering to come back to the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I think it's very important to think about our future and to help cultivate a way forward that will hopefully be better for all of us. And I hear the passion behind the words that you share, your words, and then also just speaking about the other people you have been working with. And I want to say thank you for doing that work, and also for just sharing a bit about it. I think a lot of people, like we discussed the other day, there's a lot of people that don't know how to contribute or what to do. And one of the things that comes to mind as I share that is like, what is our capacity, like as individuals? Like there's so much to navigate for all of us individually, and then with our close relationships, our families, our friends.
Yeah.
So a lot of us are just like, okay, I want to stay safe in this moment. And then, okay, once I have the safety, it's like, okay, what else can I kind of address? And so coming back to capacity, it's like, what capacity do you feel like you have, and how do you cultivate that for yourself? Like what are the practices that you have that have really enabled you to have a little more space and time and energy to kind of put towards these other things?
Well, one thing I want to underline definitely that you said is coming back to the present moment, because it is really easy to spin off into, I guess, what some people call future tripping, right? And when I think of some of the Buddhist training I've had, and I can't say that I am not I'm not a model Buddhist. I'm more of a, I for my 50th birthday, I asked friends to help this Jew relax, and I raised money to do a week at Esalen. So you've been and it was a week of learning Buddhist meditation. But one thing that stuck with me then was recognizing when I'm worrying, if the thing doesn't end up happening, then the worrying hasn't actually transformed into some sort of practical action, then the worrying has just ruined the present moment, right? And hasn't made anything better. And I come from a line of world-class worriers, not warriors, but worriers, my mom and my grandma. Although my grandma was a warrior in her way. But so that one of coming back to the present moment, definitely just trying to catch myself as I realize that I'm caught in the imagining of what could happen. And instead come back to, well, what am I feeling? Because the other danger for me with a skill that I really try to practice, and it's lifelong because I wasn't raised to do this, is to not try to change what I'm feeling, particularly if it's unpleasant or painful, anger, sadness, anxiety, I can have those shoulds in my head. Like, oh, well, you should meditate and feel good. You should be able to get perspective and then feel. It's like, no, that's bullshit. That's what one of the teachers at the workshop that I remember called the spiritual bypass. It's like, I don't have to actually feel the feelings. I'm going to drive my car off on this bypass. And it's a lovely, and I just go to the other side rather than, I think of, there was a group called Sweet Honey in the Rock that, they're African-American women, a singing group who used to sing a lot in the civil rights movement. And then after, and one of the spirituals that they sang that always hit me was wade in the water, because it's really going to be troubled water. And it does, you're like, that doesn't make sense. Wait, no, it's going to be troubled water. I better go the other direction. It's like, no, you better wade in the water. You got to go straight through it. Mm-hmm. So it's that balance for me is one of the biggies. Like, what am I feeling? Okay. Okay. I'm feeling so anxious that I'm stress eating. I'm feeling so anxious that I'm watching more porn than is good for me. I'm feeling so anxious that, I'm watching more nature documentaries till 2 a.m, like whatever it is. Right. And try to just see what I'm feeling. What has enabled me to do some political work towards the election is roundabout early spring, late winter, early spring. I really started thinking more and more about the election, and I had done canvassing, some in 2016 and some phone banking and things. And, that's better than not doing anything. But remember, this is just before COVID. I was thinking I could do that again, but I've been so living my passion for bird watching, and studying birds and all this. And it hit me that I could try to mobilize birders to get involved in get out the vote work. And because birders are we're really weird and nerdy and passionate about birding, and usually have networks in a lot of places. And I came to learn that, unfortunately, a lot of birders and a lot of environmentalists aren't reliable voters. The record of actually getting to the polls is not nearly as high as you would think. So I eventually, finally hit on somebody, someone who was a good collaborator for it. And we spent some months preparing this project, and we just launched it. I'll say the name just now. Birders will get it. It's called Auk the Vote, AUK, because the great auk was sort of like the penguin of the North, and it was hunted to extinction. And so we are now doing this project where we're reaching out to birders, trying to get them to reach out to other ones and to keep funneling people into get out the vote work. And what gave me energy and what continues to do that is they're very practical. It's like, what's the next step on this? What's the next thing that can be done? I'm not doing it alone, which for me is key. Collective action, even if it's with a small, in this case, for a while, it was just with one other person. Now we're slowly growing, but that keeps me going. And it draws on talents that I have and skills that I have. So instead of my thinking, I should be doing X that I see somebody doing, but maybe I'm not so good at that. Whereas I really have talent in this. And and skills, I would say. And by this point, I learned enough that I know how to delegate now. I didn't used to. So I learned how to find people who have the skills I don't have. And I can recognize what I can bring that now is magnifying my impact beyond what would still be good, which is phone banking, doing some postcarding. I ranted. I uploaded this four video series of rants to Facebook and Instagram yesterday about stupid activism. I was like, I'm so sick of stupid activism. And it was about stuff that's not practical. That's, calling you to get out and scream in front of an empty building, say, or, somebody suggested, I won't even go into details. It just was we need to be doing practical stuff. And I was ranting, and it was fun. It was fun to rant. But in reflecting back on it, I think it's important to keep reassuring people that you don't have to do a huge amount. Let's try to do one step more than we're doing now, but make it a smart step. Think about it, right? So that we're not wasting that energy. We're just carrying things a little further. Because the more people who do that, the more change you actually can create.
Totally. And I think one of the things that I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast is just if we want to see change in the world, it starts with us. It starts from within and it will trickle out.
Yeah.
There's a really sweet poem about that process of a man who wanted to change the world and was unsuccessful on just kind of venturing out and doing something big. And it kind of goes through this whole coming back to starting with himself, then his family, from his family to the community that they were living in, then to the greater community, and then eventually it goes out, and I think you bring up a really good point about just taking maybe one step at a time and making it something within reason, something that we know that we're either passionate about or we're good at or something that kind of has some side of energy behind it within us, because if we're doing things that we don't really want to be doing and we don't really feel comfortable doing, then, or we're not sure of how to do it, we're kind of spinning and not able to really have a clear path. So I think that's really important for people to hear.
And I'm going to disagree somewhat and agree with part as well. I was very lucky, as you know, I was very involved in ACT UP when I was young. So when I graduated in 1986. I moved to New York for dance and to find gay liberation, and I found dance. And then there was nothing happening for about 6 or 7 months in terms of gay organizing. Right then, it was this really bad period right after the Supreme Court upheld sodomy laws, upheld the right of states to criminalize gay sex. And there was this tiny little burst of activism, and then infighting and other stuff. And so for 6, 7 months, I couldn't find anything. And then I saw a poster in the subway for a massive demonstration on Wall Street about AIDS. And I ended up going. I'd never been to a demonstration, and I stood on the sidelines. But there was something about their passion and their energy that attracted me enough that I went to the group's meeting a couple of nights later or something. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was really very unlucky to have, come out into a community where people are dying left and right. Right. I mean, that was horrifying. But to have my first experience of gay community be ACT UP New York, so Larry Kramer just died, right, as you know, and Larry used to love to yell, right, and you get off your ass and do something, and that was totally necessary, but other people knew you had to laugh and have joy as well, and you had to be sexy, especially with AIDS, we ACT UP was so fucking sexy, and we could be silly and funny and have fun. And I became a facilitator of the group, and I won't go into how that happened. I never expected it. But one of the things I found was I could lighten the mood by showing up in, wearing the craziest earrings. I had chandeliers. I had these chandelier earrings. I had these sort of Regency chair earrings. I would wear, gender fuck. I'd wear sometimes sexy little tight skirts, other times really silly, you have to be able to laugh, let off steam as part of the activism. Mm-hmm. It's an example of you have to be able to feel the life force that you're fighting for. And so one thing I think is sometimes people, their image of activism or the activism they've seen or even come in contact with is that like that guilt activism, one that's all about shaking this finger at you and telling you you aren't good enough, and or it's by people who don't know how to do anything but burn themselves out. So I totally agree about that. You got to be able to feel good, but where I, in a way, disagree is certain. I think in emergencies, there's a danger in the approach of focusing I have to do my own private interior work first, and then I will be able to. Now, if you're really, you're the only one who can, each of us is the only one who can assess whether truthfully that is the case. Like, there is nothing I can do at this moment, but actually make sure whatever it is that I'm not drinking, or I'm not killing myself, or I'm not, whatever. Like, sometimes self-care is absolute, and internal growth is what someone must do then. And then that's for them to decide. But I think it's a simultaneous thing that when you try to do the interior work and reach out to try also to be affecting things beyond you, you often discover, I certainly did, oh my God, there was so much more I could do by joining with these other people. I mean, I never in a million years would have thought I could have facilitated like a room full of hundreds of New Yorkers, through arguing over AIDS, right? And what we were going to do about it. I never thought I would ever be like risking arrest, getting, you name it. There were so many things in ACT UP that I wouldn't have done if I hadn't just put myself out there a little bit. And each of the things I did were uncomfortable at first, but the language they use in our teaching now is, oh, you want to get your students in the stretch zone, not the panic zone. So in ACT UP, I was able to very often step into the stretch zone for myself and then discover I could do more than I thought, and that I didn't have to do it alone. I didn't have to have all the answers. I didn't have to have all the skills. So I do always encourage people to see if you can combine the internal work with something that still does take it, out. Because I think there's a trap sometimes of sometimes people waiting until they feel like they've done all their personal growth before doing other stuff.
Yeah. And I think just to, I agree. and I don't think I was saying don't step into spaces if you're not 100% ready. Cause I don't really think we're ever 100% going to right.
be right.
Yeah. You think about people who are like, oh, I'm going to get married once I have all of these things, or I'm, there's certain things in life that we say we want to get to this point and then we'll do it. And when there's something that is like time sensitive and there's action that needs to be taken, of course, and honor what inside, I think is what I'm speaking to. Something that you mentioned really sparked something for me. Just give me a second as I feel into that again.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I kind of envisioned as you're talking about, as you got involved with ACT UP, it's like you became this living organism, and all of the people that were part of it kind of you work together, and you found ways to elevate certain parts of this organism to function more optimally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really beautiful thing. There's something really special about coming together in that way and advocating for your rights and advocating for humans to be treated equally and not treated as if they're these second class citizens who have some sort of sickness or illness that should be kind of deemed as sinful or as if it's what their karma or what they deserve because of the decisions they're making. And that's where I'm really like, I've watched certain documentaries and read about it and heard firsthand experiences of people that went through that same experience that you're speaking about. And to get through that and to see the change happen eventually, I can only imagine how amazing that felt. And it also was really, really hard because I'm sure you lost a lot of friends throughout that time. It wasn't just this cakewalk that you went through. Like it comes with some sort of, I don't know if cost is the right word, but yeah.
For quite a while, God, there's so much in what you said. Well, I'll just say very briefly, I said I moved to New York to find gay liberation. And when I went to that first ACT UP meeting after the demonstration, I was interested, but I also thought, yeah, but I'm looking for gay liberation. And that's the big thing, not this limited thing of AIDS. I was very, very ignorant. I had been sheltered. But I very quickly saw that this was gay liberation in that moment. And yes, I was fighting, to try to stop AIDS, fighting for the people who I knew there who were infected and et cetera. But doing it was also fighting for me. It was the most powerful. I was living out what I didn't have growing up, which was a belief that it was totally okay to be gay, that it was a beautiful thing, that I didn't have to be ashamed of this, that instead this was a source of like strength in my life. This was a gift, part of what I could give to the world. And collectively, that was part of what, ACT UP wasn't all gay in New York, but it was mostly gay. And again, coming from that place where you're really asserting your right to be on this earth and that, that you're beautiful, right? Mm-hmm. For being who you are. What became hard was that for quite a while, there was nothing was slowing. There were no treatments. And as treatments came out, they weren't good enough. And people were just still dying and dying and dying. And so a lot of us, after, a number of years, experienced one form of burnout or another. And I experienced depression for the first time then. And I always liken this to, I decided I was going to get away for a week. Just take a little break because I felt like I had only two emotions, grief and rage. This was by about the second or third year into it. And back then there was this thing, you could take you could buy a ticket on a courier flight where you didn't bring any baggage except for carry-on. And the company used your luggage space, right, to send whatever. Usually it's like whatever it was, document. Today they wouldn't do this because it would be like fears of terrorism. But so I went to Amsterdam for a weekend, and without going into details, like just from this one rejection from this one boy that I had we had a one night encounter, and I wanted to see him again. He didn't want to see me again. I got literally depressed. I had never experienced it where, I would then wake up and this cloud would descend, and I didn't, anyway, it was depression. And I realized took me a little while, that it was like I had been walking further and further out on thinner and thinner ice for months without realizing it. Because the sense of needing to do more and more and more, especially as more people I love died, I didn't then balance it with, as you said, what's my capacity? I know I, quote unquote, should, that it's needed, but it took me, getting depressed to realize, oh, okay, you really need you need to actually take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And that there was somebody who stood up right around that time on the floor of ACT UP and kind of, he just impromptu spoke from the heart to tell us, like, we needed to change our mindset, that this was not ending anytime soon, that we're going to have to be in this for the long haul, which was going to have to change the way we did things. And yet I still say I experienced the community more powerfully than I ever have in my life, as hard as it was.
Yeah. I have chills just kind of sitting with that, and again, thank you for the work that you've done and for really pouring your heart and your energy into these spaces to make it possible to be gay and to be loved and more accepted. There is a lot of work that you and your friends and your community put into to make it so that we're where we're at now, and I think there's still work that continually has to be done, and I think about the civil rights movement and us coming finally. I feel like we're finally waking up and really hearing things and seeing things from a different perspective, more so than in the past, and collectively. Yeah. And it's not over. That's like the tip. We're just getting there, and there's so much, as unlearning, reprogramming, that has to be done, and on our own work internally and collectively. And I think one of the things that I noticed just in myself, even from 2 months ago, just how worked up I was hearing about George Floyd's murder and seeing not the whole video, little clip of it, and just being so just saddened and disgusted by what I saw and enraged. And I was actually thinking about this earlier today, just because of everything else that's going on around me right now. We're on an advisory, potentially have to evacuate because there's a fire nearby. And so there's a lot of other things going on in my world and in others' worlds. And it's like there's the upcoming election, and there's this trauma and healing work that needs to be done around systemic racism and so many other things, and then my own emotional work that I'm doing, with my therapist. And it's so complex. And I think something that we talked about earlier is coming back to the present moment, so that we don't become overwhelmed so much that we can't stay regulated. And I think about this term, the window of tolerance, and in therapeutic realms, we want to keep, if we're working with a client, you want to help keep people within their window of tolerance and not going into hyper arousal where they're in this state where they can't even control their emotions and they're so anxious or whatever it might be, or going into hypo where they're completely shutting down and just freezing or whatever else. So that's something that I think also is important to really bring in to this conversation as well, is really making sure, tracking ourselves, noticing where we're at. If we're getting to this point where we're so anxious that we're unable to stay focused, it's like, take a step back, do something for yourself that's going to help ground, bring you back into your body, maybe out of your mind. Because there's so much to think about. And with how much we're taking in on our devices, from the news, from social media, like it can be overwhelming. Just constantly seeing the same images or the same headlines of articles. And then the other thing about what's happening now is, I think there's a lot of false news and false things that are being put out there. So the other thing I try to track in myself is like, okay, I see something, obviously I'm getting triggered, and I need to check into this a little bit more. Where is this coming from? What source is this coming from? Because I remember a couple weeks ago and seeing something about human trafficking and just being like, oh my God, is that really what's happening? And then later on, I found out, okay, well, it's not actually the case.
Well, so yes to all of that. And like for me, bird watching, it's funny, like I always, when I say it, I anticipate not you at this moment, but like other listeners, like, oh, that's weird. Or, like that, bird watching for me is the one thing I do that I actually experience it as spiritual. Like it's the one activity where my fear of death drops away. Like the knowledge that I'm going to die and not be here usually terrifies me. Always had since I was like a little kid, like I have so much Buddhist work to do in that type of preparation. When I'm really caught up in bird watching, the existence of this beauty outside of me, but that I'm connected to, then it's okay. And I just get like fascinated, and not if I'm trying to see new species or see one that I hadn't seen recently, like it has to be in what's in front of me. I'm really looking at it. And I time, like I lose track of time, and a lot of the chatter will drop out. There's always a voice. There's always a voice early on that says, well, what's the point of this? What good does this do? I always have to go, hi, it's you again. Yeah. Right. Well, what's the point of anything? You could say that about anything I do. So thank you, but I'm going to get back to the bird watching now. And I really so that's one of the things I've discovered for me. Like, it's not trivial for me. It really is something I don't even know exactly why it touches something so deep. The other thing I don't know, is something that you've said that made me think of my late lover, Warren, who died in 1992, and who was the love of my life, certainly up to this point. And he was someone who I discovered after he died by reading his letters and stuff, he was dyslexic. He and I were so different in many ways. I was super academic and, he had barely, made it through high school. I was really, really political, and he was really emotional. He taught me to cry.
Yeah.
I had so much shame and inhibition around sex, and he was 10 years older, and he had really, really explored his sexuality, and that especially when a lot of it was with the beginning of safe sex. He had to find a way to live his sexuality, and right, sometimes not even have being physical contact. I mean, he really had to get creative. And he was a massage therapist, and I used to say to him, like, you're really woo woo. I was like, I'm miracle, you're like so woo. But he was really amazing. I very much have to remind myself to draw on his memory and his example as something empowering and loving, not as I am not living up to, your example. Instead,
Yeah.
right, to internalize and I think for a lot of us, it's like, do we find, because you mentioned the civil rights movement, that can be really empowering to learn about what people have risked and done, or it can be, and I'm so not good enough. I don't do X, Y, or Z, or I'm afraid to do X, Y. Like, and again, it does get me back. I think there's something that, you're very rooted in the internal and how central that is. And it really is. I don't think I don't know how I would have survived the pain of losing Warren if he hadn't taught me the emotional skills to do it.
And I think about something around how there's so many different types of intelligences. You can be intellectually intelligent, you can be emotionally intelligent, you can be artistic.
Yep.
There's so many, and I think our culture, like, there are certain things that are kind of put up on to a pedestal, and I'm really all for, like, helping people find what it is that they really bring to the world, and not putting this box around what it needs to be, but letting it be their authentic expression. And it's easy to kind of hold ourselves to expectations that our parents or that our religions or institutions have kind of put onto us, and ultimately I've found the most, like, joy and happiness through following, like, my heart and following the work that I love so much. And I know people who have also done that similarly in their lives. And then there's people that I work with who are so unhappy with the work that they're doing, but they did it because that's what they thought they had to do. And one thing that I also want to highlight is it's never too late to
Oh my
start
God.
a new hobby, to study something new, and to maybe even revisit things that excited us when we were much younger.
Oh, totally. I'm maybe the poster child for it's never too late, or one of them, because like, so much of who I am now day to day has been about, I don't know, re-experiencing, reclaiming things that really brought me joy and that I lost track of during those years of grief after Warren died. I settled after I was single for 10 years after he died, from like when I was 27 to 37. And had a couple of short-term things that I'd fall for people and then it didn't work out. And I finally settled and I ended up in a 9-year relationship that should have been 2. Like we're friends again now, but we were not friends for several of those years at the end. Right. And it's a relationship in which sex was not good. We were not sexually compatible, and it sort of reinforced. We had a don't ask, don't tell without even saying that. And it reinforced shame and secrecy. And, as you know, I've been working with Finn to sort through that and grow in ways that I do wish I had, I wish I had taken a right or, a left when I went right at certain points. But then again, I'm who I am because of the sum total of my experiences. Mm-hmm. And if you're lucky enough to live long enough, there's a chance every day to. I also have really bad. I took some really bad nonprofit jobs. Bad in the sense where the mission was good, but the day to day was miserable. And I got back into teaching, particularly with this job, because I realized when I did this, there's something every day that brings me joy in my teaching. And it's usually some interaction with one of the students. That shouldn't be a luxury. That should be something we think maybe that should be my baseline, can be my baseline. The birdwatching is, I lost track of that for a number of years. Wearing earrings. I mean, it sounds like a small thing, but it's actually that little bit of gender fuck brings me such joy. And I had stopped doing that for a while.
Mm-hmm. It really sounds like there's parts of you that have started to come back online and in new ways and new iterations. And I really, I think for me, just seeing you wear these different earrings and you love it and you just own it, I remember being a little boy and putting my mom's clip-on earrings and doing it then, but I never would you see me do that now? No. No.
It's amazing that, when I first started doing that I'd say 87, because it was the first year backed up, and this was in New York City. And I knew that I had to feel good to go out because, there could be abuse. I had to be in a frame of mind where I wasn't going to take it in. But twice in the course of a year, someone shouted something like, "Who do you think you are, George Michael?" And it's because he was the only visible person in the media and the culture at that time, man, who wore earrings in both ears, because left ear was okay. That was straight. Right ear was supposedly gay. But we haven't even advanced beyond that now. The self-policing about men's gender presentation is really still, I think with trans and non-binary stuff, where there's more pushing of those boundaries. But even so, unless you're identifying that way, I'm amazed at how many people still stare when I go out with a pair of, dangly earrings.
Well, I do have my ears pierced, and I actually wear plugs that are roses.
Ooh.
And they're opalites, so when the light hits them, they kind of change colors from blue to this orangish color, and I love that. And one thing I did do a couple of years ago is I put dangly earrings in while I had the plugs in, just underneath, and let it hang. And there was one I did it on one ear, and I really liked it. So you're inspiring me to maybe step into that again.
There's no should in it. And I wished it took a while for somebody to tell me, David, still, you have to choose earrings that like fit the shape of your face. It was like,
You can't just wear any.
not any. Well, you can if you want, but yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it's finding that joy. Well, and finding your authentic self, which is not static either. It's not static moment to moment, and it's not static over time. So
It's ever changing.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like to ask people as I kind of bring things to an end, one final question, and you've talked about joy quite a bit, and yeah, since you also are a bird watcher, what can you think of a moment in bird watching that's brought you a lot of joy or the most joy?
Well, I can't do the most. I can never figure out the most, but I mean, what suddenly popped into my head was a moment. It was probably last April because we were in the shelter in place, but we were still allowed to take walks, and I took a walk to a neighborhood. I started like in the evening. I would take these evening walks, and I would just walk places I hadn't been. And it was amazing that I would discover like, oh my God, I've lived in Oakland how long now? And I've never in this apartment for 3 years, and I've never been, like to a place I could walk to 15 minutes away. One evening I was walking along one of these neighborhoods, and I noticed a bird called a Buick's wren. So wren, W-R-E-N. Wrens are these little birds, and for their size, they're some of the most vocally powerful birds. They're some of the loudest for their size of any, and they're like, there's something. They usually cock their tails up, and they got attitude. And I saw one of these taking a dust bath at the end of someone's driveway, and that's when they clean themselves. I think it's something about it can help kill parasites and things. So they get in on the dust, and they fluff it over their backs, and they do these little, and then another one joined it, and another, and I must have stood there for about 45 minutes, just like watching these little birds taking their little dust baths. And I was wanting to find strangers to say, look at this, isn't this cool? Isn't this amazing? And I don't know, it was like, I was so happy. And it was an evening. I forgot. It was an evening where I almost didn't go out. I was just feeling so down and feeling like, oh, what's the point? And I can't go to the parks that I really love to go to because they've been shut down now. And instead it was like doing that, remembering something all the way from when I was a peer-to-peer counselor in college. When you were going to help somebody who had depression, one of the catchphrases was something about, it's like, act first and the feelings will follow. Don't wait until you feel good enough to do X. Try going out with your friends, or try doing this. And the feelings, you may find that they follow. And oh my God, that has gotten me through these past few months.
Wow.
But those wrens, I'm telling you, that was pure joy for me. Pure joy.
Oh. Sounds sweet.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, I'd love to also share, if possible, if you're open to it, your Instagram, so people can see some of the pictures and just
definitely
find out more about you. What is your Instagram tag?
My Instagram tag. Oh yeah, it's DVD Robinson. It's like David with no vowels, or if you're old enough, a DVD, which I hear the young people don't know about. DVD Robinson. And it does kind of give you a good picture of me, because it is,
It really does.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was a real pleasure and an honor. Yeah. I was so moved when you asked me. Because you are a beautiful, beautiful soul. And I don't say this to a lot of people, and it'll make me cry, but you do remind me in a way of Warren. There's a certain it may come from being a certain type of body worker, but there's just, I can't say any more. There's something that you're a really beautiful soul. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for listening today. If any of you would like to find out more about the work that I do, you can go to samsebastian.com. That's SAMSEBASTIAN.com. And if you're interested in being a guest on the show, please reach out to me via email. That's sam@samsebastian.com. Much love.